I realized she's there
Day of the East India Company struck a deal over a 3-mile piece of land in a fishing village not very far from here, near Fort St. George, called Madras Patna, marking the day Madras was born. So, 380 years ago, exactly on today's date, that's August 15th, the Brits were probably putting on finer details in place for this momentous purchase of this land, wondering what wigs to wear, and much like us today, looking up at the sky, wondering, is it going to rain or not? Rain on our parade and, mess up our hair, much like I was thinking today, in this August gathering of ours. Now, Odyssey has loved being part of Madras Day events, with this unique celebration of what else? Books, and the city's many, many authors. So here we have one right here, a city lover, a book lover, a writing lover, with a freshly minted, intriguingly titled, Be the Book. It's Odyssey's pleasure to host the launch of this book by Padmini Vishwanathan and her daughter, Aparna Kamakshi. Padmini, you come to the stage. We're also delighted to welcome our special guests, B. Sriram and Sita Ravi. Later, over the course of this evening, I shall be testing your knowledge of Chennai with some delightful little quizzes, and there are chocolates to be won. So now and then, brush up, think about what you know about Chennai, or what you heard from B. Sriram at many of his talks, and if you come up with the right answer, you get a chocolate. Well, to get this evening's, the main part of the function going, let me first introduce our very special guest, B. Sriram. Hi, Sriram.
Hi.
The phrase you've heard the most in your life is probably, our speaker Sriram needs no introduction. And of course, we continue to speak and speak. So what I'll do is share 3 intriguing facts I stumbled upon, and since it's Madras Day, all are linked to characteristics of Madras itself. Noting that Sriram is such a hot guy may or may not be one of them, like hot Madras. Okay, 1. Sriram is much like our city itself, British by birth, but totally Indian by heart. Did you know that? Well, I just found out yesterday. Wikipedia informs me that Sriram was born in London, but I really can't imagine a more authentic Madrasi than him. Number 2, other cities may have their own culture ambassadors, heritage promoters, but our V. Sriram, he's streets ahead. Literally, isn't it? He has individually over 75, or is it 85, or is it 95 now, Sriram, heritage walks to his credit, not just in our city, but all over India now. What a record that is. A round of applause. And number 3, as a speaker, he not only keeps audiences engaged, he marries them too. Everyone I know says, I do, when I ask, don't you love the way Sriram speaks? So that's Sriram. And about Mrs. Sita Ravi. Mrs. Sita Ravi, a pleasure to have you here. If Sriram is famous for Kal Ki Baatein, or our past, Sita is synonymous with our city's Kalki magazine. A brilliant writer, her short stories on the Carnatic music trinity were translated to English by Justice Prabhasri Devan, and recently Madras Players dramatized these lovely stories with talented and famous senior musicians playing the lead roles. Welcome, Sita Ravi. And now, I come to my dear friend Padmini Vishwanathan. Padmini and I go back a long, long way. Well, about 60 years actually. I realize that's a very age-revealing statement I've just made, despite all the avocado anti-wrinkle cream I applied on my face last night. So, please don't start calculating my age, but we've really known 60 years as I calculated yesterday. Padmini was the tall, ravishing beauty of a happy, buzzing colony buzzing with action, called Shantinagar in Bangalore. She was the best NCC cadet all India. And we still picture her with her smart NCC uniform and that long, flat, hanging ear with which she climbed mountains. And sometime after the program, if some of you want to know, I'll tell you about the crushes that the many guys in Shantinagar had on Padmini when their son isn't listening. Well, marriage brought Padmini to Madras and a lively joint family in Mylapore, leading to two marvelous books called Nostalgia and Mylapore Lodge, all laced with a wonderful sense of humor and really keen sense of observation of the wonderful middle-class life in Madras. While another is on its way, called Shantinagar Days, where I'm hoping I feature in a rather heroic light, what say Padmini. Here is her latest book with a rather unique title, P. the Book. Padmini wrote this with her daughter Aparna, a girl who packed her life with an extraordinary will to live, and also lived that life to the fullest, with her writing, computer skills, a talent for storytelling, and a sense of humor undoubtedly inherited from her mother. You'll hear more about their moving and remarkable bond, not just as mother and daughter, but as co-authors, later from Padmini herself. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my dear friend and author, Padmini. I now request our special guest and author to start the session by unwrapping the book. Padmini, would you hand over the book?
Rajesh
And the book is released. Round of applause. Imprisoned
so straight up
somewhere.
ma'am here ma'am please
Launch will be better. And the book is done.
Thank you.
That the first statement invariably made is you don't need any introduction. The second statement is how were you born in England? For which I always say that well, my parents happened to be there. That's the only answer that I can give. I have no other idea as to how I could have been born in England. Anyway, that's a different story. I must first thank Usha Chris, who is today in Bangalore, for having...
She's in Bombay.
In Bombay, okay.
Saviors.
Okay, so she's in Bombay, for having introduced me to Padmini, and that was, if I am not mistaken, almost a decade ago. And Padmini and Usha at that time were going on a tour of Georgetown. And that is the first time Usha introduced me, and later from that came a delectable book, Paru Paru Patnam Paru, of which I have a copy. And it was only last month that Sharda and I shifted home, and I remember that was one of the books that I very carefully packed away, and it has now come to the new house as well. So that was a delightful, slim book which looked at their personal experience of going around the Georgetown area, keeping the Armenian church as a focal point and then going all around. At that time, I realized that Padmini was also very inspired to write Nostalgia, which is a book centered once again around the Armenian church and a family that lives very close by. And I happened to have read it independently around whenever this book came out a few years ago. And once again, Padmini was very kind enough to send me a copy of this book. And it was with great pleasure that I read it, and then I read Be the Book. as my preparation for being here this particular evening. One of the very interesting points that I felt when I started reading Be the Book is, as an author, you are the book always. You put in your whole life and soul into every creation that comes out. It is almost like giving birth, I'm sure. And so the title is very much what most authors feel when they bring out a book. It is a reflection of their personality. I can't say the same experience is true of bringing out a commissioned coffee table book, of which I have done several now. And most people invariably ask me, how is it after you have brought out a coffee table book? I always tell them that it is like having your 10th or 11th child. ரெண்டு கண்ணு ரெண்டு காது மூக்கு கழுத்து கை எல்லாம் இருந்தா சரி, அதுக்கு மேல லிமிட்டட் போட்டு வராதீங்க போறோம் அப்படின்னு சொல்லி you push it off to one corner and then you don't deal with the book thereafter. And I also realized that unlike these books, which are a work of passion, a coffee table book is one more of a matter of duty. And it was brought home to me with brutal frankness from the first client who commissioned me to do a coffee table book. 300 pages of hard work, 400 photographs, proofreading, editing, rewriting and everything, and finally the book comes out, it's being released, and he hisses into my ear, don't worry, nobody is going to read it anyway. This is right in the middle of the release function. The other matter that really commended me to this book is it's very nice and small, easy to carry. So when you release it, there's no danger of dropping it. So there was this book that I did for Karur Vysya Bank, and I must say the client wrote most of the book themselves after I had been paid off. And then I was invited for the book release, and nobody told me that the book had burgeoned and burgeoned and burgeoned. Photographs of the board of directors again and again and again and again. And finally, they never told the President of India the weight of the book. So Mr. Pranab Mukherjee is told, now you will release the book. And then two aides de camp bring the book and they dump it in his hand, and he was because he never thought that the weight was of that great an extent. Having struggled, he finally released the book, or as he said, released the book and unleashed the book, more or less. The same thing happened a year later when there was a coffee table book with a flyleaf jacket, so heavy that the chief guest was left holding the flyleaf jacket and the book had crashed on his toe just a moment before he released it. So none of those dangers is walking. But jokes apart, I thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. That is to me that was the great takeaway at the end of this whole thing. I also realized, like Valmiki's Ramayana, that a moment of great sorrow is what really spurred Padmini to take this book and finally bring it out. Valmiki says that the Ramayana begins with Ma Nishada, the shloka, which curses the hunter for having separated two Krauncha birds at a moment of great happiness, and that is how the Ramayana really begins. Similarly, for Padmini, it was the separation from her child, Aparna Kamakshi, who is really the spirit of this book. She is there in every page of this work, and she is the one who really brings the book to life. Padmini is more of a narrator in this work because she is looking at everything from Aparna Kamakshi's point of view, and at every stage Aparna is consulted in this book, no matter whether it is the early years of the content and then onwards to the very production of the book and the bringing out of the book. And then you realize at one point that Aparna is not there, and then Padmini is writing in her own voice the rest of the book with a great determination and will to bring it out. Full congratulations to you for having brought it out so that we can read and enjoy it. Now on to the book itself. What does a typical author go through when they are bringing out a work of passion like this one? There is first the idea as to bringing out a book, and it is very interesting that in this particular work there is the seed of another work which I am sure when it comes out will be Padmini's finest book. It is a story set in the Aryalur railway accident, I am sure which many people remember here today, sometime in the 1950s, for which Lal Bahadur Shastri took moral responsibility and stepped down as the railway minister. When I began reading this book, I found that the Aryalur railway accident is there, and it kept me gripped And suddenly I found the Adyar railway accident stopped, because it is one of the very many ideas that mother and daughter had in their mind of bringing out. They documented significant parts of it and then they left it, hoping that one day they will go back to it and then write it and bring it out as a book. And I really look forward to that day when that book comes out, because I'm sure it is going to be gripping. There are many characters, none of them is directly in the train itself, but they are all in the periphery of the railway accident and as to how it impacts their lives. So in a way it's like Murder on the Orient Express with the train as the central character, and then the rest of the characters coming around. You have to write that book one day, Padmini, and I hope it will happen, release will happen very soon, and I promise you wherever I am traveling, I will come back in time for the book release. That's one. Be the Book, as I said, is a story of how an author goes about creating a book and the frustrations that the author faces at every turn. It starts with the idea itself. Will this idea be good? Will the idea be bad? Will it be accepted? Who's going to tell us? Go ahead and write it. So Padmini has a dictionary up front where she talks about what is your personal definition of various aspects of a book process, what is the outside world's definition of it, and what is the dictionary's definition of it. So that is when this whole world of how difficult it is really comes out, because you think an idea is great, the publisher thinks it stinks, and then finally the audience which buys it, suddenly it turns out to be a bestseller. And she's quoted 4 or 5 examples in this book of authors whom I personally wouldn't touch with a barge pole, but I know that their books sell in several millions today. So it just goes to show that there is no accounting for public taste when you know what sells and what doesn't sell. And I must say I commend those publishers who rejected those books up front, because they are not really great. But so there is the whole process of the idea, then there is the process of writing, and finally there is the process of taking it around to the various publishers and saying, will you publish my book, will you publish my book, will you publish my book? And at each stage the publisher says, we will only publish if you have already published 2 other books. And Padmini's question is, what happens if I am a first-time author? Who is going to publish me then? There isn't anybody like that. So finally it comes around to the travails of self-publishing. And then it is not only self-publishing, it is self-layouting, if there is a process like that. How do you define the layout of the book? Then self-marketing, self-promotion, which as Cambrams we are total failures at. I'm sure if it had been given to a Punjabi, just to the cover they would have gone around, sold the film rights in the Scandinavian, and then started off writing the book. But then we are Cambrams, we are told, ayyo, idella drishti vizhindrumba modalla eduthu pohade. Ezhudina appuram modalla Vijayadashami aniki Ambal minadi vechittu Ambal minadiye da irukum, adukapra it's never going to go anywhere. So this humility that we are brought up with as good Cambrams, and this frightful scare of the drishti or the evil eye, is something that we may have to discard sometimes. So finally self-marketing, and then self-pricing. Everything is here. So what is it that the author does not do at the end of the day? They've been involved at every stage of the book, including the selling of it, and finally if it sells, very good. If it doesn't sell, the author is once again blamed. Woodhouse writes about how there is a formula. If an editor accepts your book, take 1 more book to him. If the editor rejects the book, take it to another editor. This is the only formula that Woodhouse gives. And Dickens incidentally writes the same thing. I don't think experiences have really changed over the centuries ever since the first book was written. I'm sure somewhere up there Shakespeare is smiling down at all of us and saying, God knows how much difficulty I had in taking around The Tempest or The Comedy of Errors or whatever it was to try and get a publisher for it. So Padmini, wonderful book, very, very readable, and I'm not going to let out everything that is in the book. Written with a great touch of humor. That is the most important thing, and Padmini herself writes a lot about the importance of being humorous in a book, which I think is certainly a very, very commendable thought, particularly in today's world where humor is really looked down upon. We've become very serious as a society, and we are becoming increasingly serious as a society. So if somebody writes something even humorously, in Madras, a case is filed against him in Tanjavur or Thindikkal or Ramanathapuram, and then that person has to go around defending himself or herself at every possible location. And then if you write a comment, you are offending some fringe group which you did not even know existed, and they come out and say, no, our rights have been offended. The matter is discussed in the legislature. Sometimes it's good if it's discussed in the legislature because the book becomes a bestseller in the process. But it's not all books that get discussed in the legislature either. So humor, in my opinion, is really that thread which keeps us going, keeps us smiling, keeps us happy. I don't think sorrow is going to ever play a similar role. So I'm so happy that you emphasized on the humor element in this book. Thank you very much for bringing it out, and I commend this book to everyone. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Wonderful to have Aparna and Padmini work for us at the Kalki group of publications. Aparna wrote, actually she first wrote a serial for Gokulam English, the magazine for children. Unfortunately, it's not in publication now. It ceased to be published now because the ends don't meet. And that speaks about a lot for the publishing industry. Well, she did so well that we thought we should take her on board, and at that time the management decided to start a new magazine called Gokulam Caliber Comics, and Aparna came on board as a sub-editor to turn out picture stories month after month as a magazine. And mind you, it was very, very difficult work, but Padmini used to accompany her to the office quite often, and we would both sit and do that grueling work with so much of passion. And I think we produced about more than a half a dozen issues, but again it didn't make ends meet, so it had to stop. But the brief association with Aparna and Padmini made us such good friends, and the association continued for a long time, and I too read with much admiration her Nostalgia and Mylapore Lodge. So I'm very happy to be here and share a very proud and rare moment for the author. I love the title, Be the Book. I wish we could all be the book. Anyway, I have bought the book. I bought the first copy. I've set an example, I hope. I would also like to congratulate Padmini's husband Ganga, who is here and who shares her lovely sense of humor. If you have read Mylapore Lodge, you know that. Very happy to be here with Sri Ram and the rest of you, and to be a part of this wonderful Letters Week celebration. Thank you so much.
I know that, like me, Aparna is also feeling very happy that we are all here together, and writing of this book was one of the last joyful projects that we both did together. Now, Sita was talking about our relationship to her. As soon as Aparna came back from the so-called interview with Sita, she came and said, "Amma, guess what? I've been offered a job." And so I said, "Wow, great." So she says, I told the editor that I'm a buy one, get one free person. So I said, "Meaning what?" She said that she told her that if I come for work, my mother also will come. So that is how I ended up working along with Aparna on the comic magazine, and it was the most great, fun, happy thing that we did one of the many great happy things that we did together, the comic magazine. And like Sita says, we found a really delightful and lovely friend in Sita. Thank you, Sita. So now I was a little scared that Sriram may say all the things that I have planned to say. Fortunately, though, he said that I had quoted so and so and so and so, he didn't tell you what the quotes are, so now I'm going to tell you what they are. Now, the first thing is, we think of ourselves as authors, right? So, who is an author? Now, our description is that an author is one man, or in our case, two women, who tries to conquer a series of diabolical opponents like the editor, publisher, distributor and critic to reach his target audience, the reader. Okay, and the editor is a person who, in the pretext of setting your book right, converts it into an unidentifiable entity. Of course, George Bernard Shaw said, the road to ignorance is paved with good editors. Now, when you talk about a publisher, there's this anonymous author who said that if Moses were to come down the mountain now, he would be with the 10 commandments, he would be spending the next 5 years of his life searching for a publisher. Okay. And when you asking now, there's this Christopher Hampton who said that asking a writer, working writer, what he thinks of a critic is like asking a lamppost what it thinks of a dog. And there's this guy who said that if the English language made any sense, the word lackadaisical should have something to do with the shortage of flowers. So being able to put your work in print and making a print-on-demand copy, even a handful of them, shows publishers and editors that you can follow through and finish a project that you wanted to do. So, and that is what we did. With my first two books, Nostalgia and My Love Good Lodge, we self-published them. So like Sriram said, when I say self-published them, we did it all ourselves. We had one problem after the other, we just overcame those and we did everything ourselves. Now my daughter Kritika, who's standing over there, refers to the two of us as Twiddledee and Twiddledum. Since we spent so much time working and just being together, we behaved like two identically wired robots, you could say. So, wondering what to do next, we both simultaneously said, let's write a book on self-publishing. After all, we have so much experience. So that was how we started writing this book. Now, at this point, I want to thank Kritika. Not only did she design the book cover, but she suggested the tagline, the self-publishing route to self-discovery. Our book was supposed to be a self-publishing book first. Now, having given us this tagline, she helped me to increase the scope of the book to its present form, which is much more than what we had planned in the beginning. This new book talks about the roller coaster ride we went through in our efforts to self-publish those two books. And this has every type of pointer on the do's and don'ts of self-publishing, on life, about ourselves, about the publishing fraternity, and I in particular went through a period of intense self-discovery. So I think Sriram has told you all everything else about the book. So I'll stop by saying that I hope you all enjoy reading the book as much as we did writing it. Now I have to look at Ashwin and say, Ashwin, are you going to save me now from my problem? I forgot to bring the... Yeah, there. Saved. Thank you so much. Okay, so now this is something else. Now Aparna and it was Aparna's and my dream to start a community blog for people who enjoy writing and want to share what they've written. People who just write for the joy of writing and nothing else. And so she named it Penning for Pleasure. And I started the blog after she passed away. And surprisingly, we received almost 60 entries by the time we came to the month of June. So I didn't know how to go about expanding the scope, the number of people who would contribute. So I thought maybe starting a competition would do it, and we had a competition. And funnily we got almost 20 to 22 entries. And I thought it would be a good opportunity now to announce the prizes because some of the people who contributed were from outside Madras. Some of them or their relatives are here, and we've always been supported with full force by Odyssey from the day I came to him with my first book. By the way, I might as well tell you this short story. I came there and I told him I have this book, and I have 75 rupees to give you. And he said, ma'am, we take 40%. I said, so how much is 40%? So he gave me some wild big number and I almost died on the spot. I said, oh my God, 40%? He said, all shops take 40%, ma'am. Didn't you go to a publisher? I said, no, I went, but nobody answered. Then he said, okay, yeah. And he gave me a list of people, and like Sriram says, you go there and they'll tell you, we'll publish you if it's your third book and things like that. All that happened. And he said, come back to me if you don't find anybody else. And he kept my books on his shelf in a very noticeable place with the 75 rupees as his commission. So, this backing that I've received from Odyssey, Doc, hi. So so we are giving away gift coupons from Odyssey as prizes for this competition. So I'll just announce the prizes. The best short story was Tejaswini Vardachari. She's not here, she's from Bangalore. I just want to say that hers was the most outstanding entry in the whole competition. It was a story that kept you guessing till the end. Who is this husband she's talking about? Okay, and since y'all can read it in my blog, okay? Now, the best article goes to Banu Ramaswamy, who happens to be Indu's elder sister. So Indu can receive the prize in her on her behalf.
My mother has always thought Padmini is the fourth sister, but I swear this was judged independently.
Yeah, oh, by the way. Oh, by the way, that's family. Really? Family to be at the next launch. Okay? Good evening, good night, and enjoy the book. The author is available to. Oh, yes. Yeah. Rest will stay back.
Book. It's a book about an author's journey, about writing the book, and then all the processes that the author goes through to make it finally a published product. It's an exercise in self-publication at the end with a very, very moving personal story behind it. So now it's over to the author, Padmini.
Last project I did with my daughter, and it's a very happy book in the sense that it was something we did so joyfully together, and it was a very big learning lesson for me because I went through the process of discovering how I would continue living without my daughter there to support me. So that is why it was not just a self-publishing book, but it was a book on self-discovery also. Not just self-discovery, but in my case, it was self-recovery also. புத்தகம் எனக்கு ரொம்ப சந்தோஷம் கொடுத்தது. எனக்கு இது நானும் என் பொண்ணுமா சேர்ந்து கடைசியாக படித்த புத்தகம் வந்து இந்த புத்தகம் வந்து நாங்கள் முதல்ல செல்ஃப் பப்ளிஷிங்கை பற்றி என்னெல்லாம் நாங்கள் கஷ்டப்பட்டோம், எப்படி பண்ணணும் அப்படின்னு பாயிண்டர்ஸ் எல்லாம் கொடுத்து ஒரு செல்ஃப் ஹெல்ப் புக்காக எழுதுறதா ஆரம்பித்தோம். ஆனால் கடைசியில் வந்து எந்த காரியம் பண்ணினாலும் அதோடு நம்ம வந்து கொஞ்சம் ஏதாவது லேர்ன் பண்ணுவோம். நம்ம வந்து தட் இஸ் வி லேர்ன். நாங்கள் வந்து முன்னேற்றமும் ஏதோ கொஞ்சம் நடக்கிறது நம்மளுக்கு. அது மாத்திரம் இல்லை, இது பாதி வழியில் என் பொண்ணு இறந்து போயிட்டா. ஸோ எனக்கு வந்து என் பொண்ணு போனால் நான் என்ன பண்ணுவேன் அப்படிங்கிற ஒரு துக்கத்தில் இருந்தப்போ நானும் அவளும் பண்ணிட்டு இருந்த புஸ்தகத்தை நான் முடிச்சேன்னாக்க தான் எனக்கு வந்து மன திருப்தி வரும் அப்படிங்கிற எண்ணத்தோடு எழுதின புஸ்தகம். அதனால் இதில் வந்து செல்ஃப் ஹெல்ப் மாத்திரம் இல்லை, ஸ்டோரி ஆஃப் ஆர் லைஃப்ஸும் சேர்ந்து வந்து. தேங்க்யூ.